Okay, so you mentioned concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs. Can you just explain a little more in depth what is a CAFO, and why do people refer to these as factory farms?
Right. Well, the CAFO has a kind of a legal definition, and it goes back to the Environmental Protection Agency because people have been concerned about these large concentrated animal feeding operations. And so some of the general characteristics are that so many animals are concentrated in such small spaces that you don't have any grass cover or crops on the soil where the animals are out, or in most cases the animals are actually kept indoors, particularly for hogs and chickens. So that's one of the requirements. The other requirement has to do with the size of the operation. For example, EPA would say that what they call like 300 animal units would be a small CAFO, the other conditions being met, and that would be about 750 hogs would be a small CAFO. Typically we talk about CAFOs like 1,000 animal units, or that'd be 2,500 hogs, which would be, EPA would classify as a larger CAFO. Different states have different requirements in relation to this because, like in Iowa, for example, there's regulations that go in at 500 animal units, which is like 1,250 hogs. That would be different than the smaller operations. So that's basically what we're talking about. And the reason they call them factory farms goes back to this idea that you specialize in producing one particular animal, really one phase in most cases of the total animal production, like feeding out as opposed to having the breeding stock where you're farrowing the pigs. So it's specialized and then it's standardized so that in these large operations then you have automatic feeding and watering and the facilities are all standardized. It's kind of like a factory. That's the hogs are sort of workers in the factory and the feed comes in and that's sort of the input, and then the animals leaving the operation, that's sort of the output. It sort of runs like a factory. And then the third part of it is then you can consolidate control of these. You've simplified the production process to where you can hire people to do the work rather than have individual decision makers, and then you simplify it so that you can concentrate the management into larger and larger operations, and now in large corporations basically make all of the important decisions on those operations. So that's the reason they call it factory farms, is it runs a lot like a factory and it looks like an industrial process.
So it sounds like it's a lot more like mechanized than methods we've been using in the past.
So when you simplify the production process, that's specialized, standardized, then you can simplify and routinize the process, and many of the things then can be mechanized, like the mechanized feeding and watering. And in many cases, the people that work in these CAFOs do little more than make sure that the machines that feed and water the animals are running from day to day. So they don't do much of anything else. So much of the processes they can get is mechanized, and the rest of it's simplified so that you can hire basically minimum wage workers to produce the hogs rather than rely on like the traditional farmer.